Breaking news today. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg has agreed to delay President-elect Trump's sentencing that was slated for November 26. In the court filings, which come 2 weeks after Trump's White House victory, Bragg agreed that further proceedings in the hush money conviction should be delayed. Trump's attorneys have sought to dismiss the case to avoid what they say are unconstitutional impediments to the incoming president's ability to run the country. Manhattan prosecutors said they opposed Trump's demands to dismiss his criminal hush money case. Judge Juan Mershon, who is overseeing the case, now must decide whether to push back sentencing, toss the conviction altogether, or move forward despite Trump's election victory.
House Republicans are committed to working with President Trump and his nominees and the administration as we prepare for what will be a breakneck 119th Congress. And the incoming administration is going to be filled with great men and women, and we trust and hope that Senate Republicans will, and the whole Senate, will perform their constitutional responsibility to advise and consent on President Trump's nominees, and to do that in a speedy, expeditious manner.
You hear right there House Speaker Mike Johnson urging Senate Republicans to move forward with President-elect Trump's picks for top posts in his coming administration. Some of the most controversial picks are causing concern over their qualifications, past positions, and even potential criminal activity. And it's setting up some difficult decisions for Republicans on whether to support Trump's nominees. For even less controversial picks, there is intense jockeying inside Trump world for the most coveted positions. Here to talk about the latest, Brett Samuels, White House reporter here at The Hill. Hey Brett, how's it going? Another cabinet post, another Fox News personality, Trump tapping Sean Duffy for Secretary of Transportation. He is a former Republican congressman from Wisconsin, also former reality TV star. He was on MTV's Real World Boston. Big question I have, under a Duffy DOT, would the department move to cut some of these programs that aim to limit carbon emissions? You know, they're often mocked by Republicans, but, you know, I'm thinking of for someone like Elon Musk, who is, in the business of selling electric vehicles. Also, if I'm a Republican congressperson who has seen some benefit from those programs in my district, there could be some resistance even from influential aspects of the Republican Party to cutting back on those programs.
Absolutely. I think this is going to be one of the big kind of push and pulls that we're going to see play out early on in this new administration, this new Congress, is this idea that Trump has historically sort of railed against, regulations. He's railed against electric vehicle incentives. He called it the electric vehicle mandate, which is essentially these incentives that the Biden administration passed to nudge automakers toward producing more electric vehicles. But as you said, Elon Musk, who is always in Trump's ears nowadays, obviously is the CEO of Tesla. Big incentive for him to sort of push for electric vehicles. And as you mentioned, there are lawmakers, Republican lawmakers in some states, who have seen their districts benefit from investments in clean energy sources, in electric vehicle production, where it's sort of created jobs in their districts. So, I wouldn't bank on Republicans just outright saying we're going to cut back on a lot of these regulations. There may certainly be some fights to play out there.
That was part of the aim of the people pushing green energy, new infrastructure in districts that Republicans control to make sure it has longevity through different administrations. I want to talk about the position of Treasury Secretary. There's been a lot of jockeying inside Trump world for this position. Elon Musk has been promoting Howard Lutnick on X, but there's news today that position for Lutnick might actually be up for Commerce Secretary. Others have been pushing Scott Bessent. Elon Musk has been criticizing him on social media. Apparently they met over the weekend. Can you talk about some of this infighting within the Trump world over these key positions? I take it that there's been some frustration maybe on the part of Trump over the infighting.
Yeah, certainly Trump's economic team is the one area where we have yet to really see a lot of movement. As you mentioned, sources telling us that Howard Lutnick is expected to be nominated as Commerce Secretary, which obviously plays a big role in trade policy. Obviously, Trump has been a big proponent of tariffs and imposing tariffs, sort of blanket tariffs on all imports, so that will be a key position there. But otherwise, Treasury Secretary is sort of the big shoe that we're waiting to see drop. And as you mentioned, there's this fight over who will fill the position has sort of spilled out into public view, which had not really happened with other positions, even if there was some behind-the-scenes jockeying. Treasury Secretary is one where it's become this sort of public back and forth. As you mentioned, Elon Musk over the weekend disparaged Scott Bessent as he called it a business as usual choice, and he used that as sort of a critical term to say we can't have a business as usual pick. Trump has gotten, as you mentioned, sort of frustrated by the candidates in front of him, so he's branched out his search a bit. Robert Lighthizer, who was the U.S. Trade Representative in his first administration, is somebody who's in the mix there from what I've been told. Mark Rowan, who is a big investor in the Apollo Group, is been meeting with Trump about the position. And Kevin Warsh, who's a former Federal Reserve governor, also in the mix. So certainly, as you mentioned, Trump doesn't appear to be quite settled on a Treasury Secretary, but that has been, I think, the most interesting pick to watch it kind of sort out in real time.
Those aren't the most controversial picks. Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, Tulsi Gabbard, DNI, RFK Jr., AHHS, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. Those are the nominees that have really caused shockwaves across Washington. It is hard to argue that they're qualified in their traditional sense of what you would consider qualifications for those posts. So what do you think, or what are you hearing are Trump's motivations for those nominations?
Yeah, certainly I think these nominations are a sign that Trump is following through on the kind of rhetoric that he used on the campaign trail. He talked about, his concerns about the weaponization of the Justice Department, his concerns about the quote-unquote deep state, and people who might be trying to target him politically. He talked about the possibility of going after his own political opponents with the Justice Department. Matt Gaetz is a sort of firebrand who has spoken similarly about defunding the FBI, about shaking up the Justice Department. So that certainly fits with that. Pete Hegseth has appeared on Fox News for the last several years as somebody who Trump has seen on TV a lot, which appeals to him, and has also railed against this idea of a quote-unquote woke military, these sort of like equity and diversity, programs that the military has tried to encourage. He's railed against those. Trump on the campaign trail also railed against those, so kind of makes sense there. But, as you mentioned, very controversial picks. Gaetz in particular has gotten a lot of blowback on Capitol Hill from senators on both sides of the aisle, but I think a sign that Trump is not kidding around when he was on the campaign trail talking about these things.
Let's talk more about Gaetz. Elon Musk was up early this morning promoting him on X. There are reports today that a hacker got access to damaging testimony about Gaetz and an alleged relationship with a 17-year-old girl, alleged sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl. Gaetz denies this. Democratic Representative Susan Wild, she's the top Democrat on the Ethics Committee. She wants this ethics report into Gaetz released. Even Republican senators say they also want it released. What is the latest on that? Will it ever see the light of day?
Yeah, so there's expected to be a vote on the Ethics Committee about whether to release this report. It would require at least one Republican to vote with all the Democrats on the committee in favor of releasing the report for it to be released. Obviously, there's a lot of tension around this. Speaker Johnson has said that it shouldn't be released, saying that it would sort of be a breach of precedent, that now that Gaetz is no longer a member of Congress, that it would be out of their jurisdiction. But as you mentioned, there are even Republican senators who have said that they want to see this report, that they feel it would actually help the process move along more quickly as they weigh his nomination if they had their hands on this report. So, it does seem like there is sort of mounting pressure for this report to be shared in some form, either with senators in general, voted to share it publicly. But it does seem as if at least the meat of this report, or the main allegations of this report, will probably become public in some form.
It'll be interesting to see if it's actually leaked if the Ethics Committee votes against releasing it, because we are in Washington after all. Senate Republicans are saying no-go to a Trump transition team proposal to use outside firms to vet potential cabinet posts and other top administration picks instead of going through the traditional FBI background check system. What are Senate Republicans saying, as because they have to ostensibly confirm these nominees once they come before them? Are they going to go with these private background checks, or would they like to hear from the FBI?
Yeah, I think there is concern about sort of circumventing the typical system, going through the FBI. Obviously, as I mentioned, Trump and his team are sort of skeptical of the FBI. They are, no fans of Christopher Wray, the FBI director. I think there's a pretty good chance we see Trump nominate somebody to replace Christopher Wray potentially. But with that being said, I think this gets at one of the issues we're seeing with this transition, which is that Trump is nominating these sort of unorthodox figures, Pete Hegseth, Matt Gaetz, et cetera, and that going around the typical background check process is giving even some Republican lawmakers pause about what may come out about these nominees if there is a thorough vetting, if they don't go through the traditional process. Pete Hegseth, as we've seen in recent days, there's been these allegations of sexual assault that came out, this incident involving him and this woman in 2017. He denies that he was in the wrong here. The Trump transition is standing by Pete Hegseth, but just another example, I think, of what may come out about these candidates if they are not fully and thoroughly vetted.
Running out of time here, but I wanted to ask you about this push that we're going to see from President Trump and Republicans next year to renew the tax cuts that were passed initially during the first Trump term. There's been some ideas floated on how to pay for them, tariffs, cuts to the IRA. As we talked earlier, some of these programs are popular even in Republican districts. How big of a fight do you see this being over renewing these tax cuts and how to pay for them?
Yeah, certainly I think it's shaping up to be a fight between sort of the more traditionalist kind of wing of the GOP that says, we need to cut spending, we need to offset spending so that we're not driving up the debt. Certainly there's a number of Republicans who would be fine cutting programs like Medicare, like SNAP benefits, these sort of social safety net programs, but that would create an outcry. Democrats would plaster that over campaign ads everywhere heading into the midterms that Republicans wanted to cut those programs. On the other hand, you have folks like Trump who just kind of shrug that off and say, tariffs will pay down the national debt, even if it isn't quite a 1-to-1 ratio. Or maybe they just aren't concerned so much anymore about driving the national debt up at this point because it's already ballooned so much. And they'll be more concerned about passing these tax cuts that they think are popular with voters. So certainly a fight I would expect to see play out in the upcoming Congress.
All right, Brett Samuels, White House reporter at The Hill. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks. Training exercises continue with the National Guard along the U.S. southern border today. It's all part of Operation Lone Star's mass migration operation. News Nation's Allie Bradley has the latest from Del Rio, Texas.
Another training event down here in Eagle Pass, Texas, as Texas DPS and Operation Lone Star continues to prepare for a mass migration event. So this is how they're responding. They want to be in a proactive stance versus a reactive stance should a surge in illegal immigration happen ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration. So we were here last week when they started conducting these exercises in the Del Rio sector, namely here in the Eagle Pass area. And you could see red and blues flashing as far as the eye could see down here at the southern border. And that is the case once again here today. And Texas National Guard is involved as well. They're splitting up the groups down here in order to cover more ground. They're conducting these exercises along the southern border, so they have to be in more places at once. Take a listen to what Texas DPS Lieutenant Oliveras had to say about these migrant response exercises.
We're taking proactive steps by having these mass migration response exercises, different regions of the border, not only in South, but also in the western parts of the region. So we started in Brownsville, Texas, where the week of Title 42 was there. We carried this on to Eagle Pass, El Paso. So we want to conduct these exercises to send a clear message for anyone that's thinking about crossing or entering the state of Texas that we're going to make it very difficult.
Now, despite the continuous expansion of Operation Lone Star and the billions of dollars spent in Texas to secure the southern border, large groups are once again making their way into this area just outside of Shelby Park. That, of course, the park that Governor Abbott seized and took control of. It's pretty much fortified, but they're finding their way just outside where the barriers end. And they're still coming in big groups. Just this morning, we were there as a group of over 100 crossed illegally into Eagle Pass on federal land. So Texas DPS can't really do anything there. The group consisted of migrants from all over, including Venezuela and the Dominican. Now, also in the group, 2 men from what are considered special interest countries in Africa. One man from Nigeria told me that he was going to be with his uncle, who has actually lived here for 13 years. And where are you? Who are you going with?
My uncle is there.
Your uncle is there, and you're from Nigeria.
Yes.
Why are you here now? Why'd you come now?
Why did I come now?
Yeah.
But my uncle is here. He's invited me.
How long has your uncle been here?
Maybe more than 20-something years or what.
So why now? Why didn't you come 13 years ago?
Just that there's a lot of saying I'm not around that time.
And then look at this. Earlier this week, Texas DPS troopers catching a group of 154 migrants who crossed the Rio Grande illegally into Eagle Pass. They're from all over, too, including Cuba and Venezuela. Also in that group, though, these guys, 6 men from Afghanistan, flagged as special interest migrants. The sector has been seeing an increase in that demographic, special interest migrants. 20 unaccompanied children were also in that group. That group handed over to Border Patrol after crossing through federal and private land without barriers or landowner permission. Now, in just a single day this week, 266 unaccompanied children were encountered down here at the southern border, 66 of them right here in the Del Rio sector in one day. Now, when it comes to expanding Operation Lone Star, that's something that Governor Abbott continues to do down here to prevent those illegal crossings. One thing we can expect to see, the expansion of that controversial buoy barrier, something that he's been embroiled in legal battles with for years now. That is going to be expanding. We can see more buoys drop as early as tomorrow. Drew?
Ali Bradley, thank you. World leaders are speaking out after more than 40 pro-democracy advocates in Hong Kong were sentenced to up to 10 years in jail on Tuesday. The 45 activists who were sentenced were charged back in 2021 for their involvement in an unofficial primary election to pick opposition candidates to run in Hong Kong's general election. In total, 47 activists were charged with conspiracy to commit subversion under a Beijing-imposed national security law. 31 pleaded guilty and 14 were convicted, 2 were acquitted. The sentences have drawn criticism from the leaders of Australia, Britain, the UN, and US, as well as human rights groups, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch. The Office of China's Foreign Minister responded to the criticism, saying no one should be allowed to use democracy as a pretext to engage in unlawful activities and escape justice. The Foreign Minister's office also said Beijing opposed Western countries' interference in China's internal affairs. Just days after, President Biden gave the green light for Ukraine to use long-range missiles in Russian territory, officials in Russia say Ukraine has done just that. According to Moscow, Ukrainian forces fired 6 ATACMS missiles at targets in Russia's Bryansk region on Tuesday. It's the first use of the weapons inside Russia in 1,000 days of war. It comes on the heels of an order from Russian President Vladimir Putin that lowers the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. The update to Russia's nuclear doctrine says that any aggression from non-nuclear states that is supported by a nuclear state will be considered a joint attack. A spokesperson for the Kremlin said that an attack with conventional weapons, like the one Ukraine carried out, would be consistent with the new doctrine and could trigger a nuclear response. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Drew Petrimoulx. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel, and come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.